My name is Samah, and I am Integral Software Education Lead. In this video, I will be going over how to build a rock, paper, scissors Android application. We had started this project at our very first Integrate Detroit free coding workshop this past weekend. And for those of you who may not have finished the project during the workshop or want to build it again or want to share this awesome project with your friends, this video will show you how to build the application. An assumption I have made throughout this video is that you have beginner's knowledge of Java. So with that being said, let's get started. We're going to get started by downloading the Android Studio IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and this is where we will be both designing how the Android application looks like and what it does. So when you go to developer.android.com/studio in whatever browser you prefer, you should be able to download Android Studio for your laptop. And after this is downloaded, we will start with the next step. So once it's finished downloading, we are just going to go ahead and open up the file that was downloaded and install Android Studio. If you are on a Windows computer, this process will be a little bit different, but just follow the instructions in the executable file. So on a Mac, all you're going to do is just click and drag the Android Studio application icon into your applications folder, and that should install it for you, and then we'll do some setup for the IDE itself. Awesome. So once you have downloaded Android Studio and installed it, we can go ahead and open it. And we are going to need to do some setup since this is the first time we have launched Android Studio. So go ahead and open it. And go ahead and say do not import settings. All right, so from here, we are just gonna follow the setup wizard. We're gonna hit next. We're gonna do a standard installation. You can customize your own if you want, but I'm not gonna go through that. I like my IDE to be in dark mode. If you prefer having it be in light mode, go for that, but I will be having a dark IDE. And if you want to review anything, go ahead and change whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and click finish. And it's going to download all the stuff it needs. So that might have taken a long time, and I appreciate your patience if it did. We are finished now with the setup wizard, so we can go ahead and click finish. When you click finish, what you see is this launch screen where you're able to either start a new project or open a project that's already existing. So we are going to start a new project, and we are going to start a project with an empty activity. We're going to hit next. Name our project. I'm going to name my project rock, paper, scissors. And what you can see happening is that as you're editing the name, it modifies your package name and the save location. Your save location will probably be somewhere different. I have specifically told Android Studio to save all my projects to my development folder, which is a folder that I made to store all my programming projects. Yours might be going to Android Studio projects. If you want to change it to somewhere else, you can click on the folder icon and change the location where it's saving. I would just recommend that you save it somewhere you remember. Then looking at the minimum API level, I'm going to choose minimum API level of 21, which means that about 85% of the people who have Androids will have a device running API 21 or higher. So if you want for future projects to explore what the API level means or how it affects your application or how your application plays out on the market, feel free to explore that. And if you want, just leave a comment for this video, and I'd be happy to share some resources with you about what the minimum API level means and how it affects you. But for now, we're just going to choose a minimum API level of 21, and we're going to click finish. So now Android Studio puts together our application, and you'll see that it's running through some stuff over here, and it's actually went really fast this time. It might take a little bit longer for you as it indexes, and if it's indexing your files, it will be displayed down here at the bottom. So whenever yours is done running through whatever it needs to run through, we are just going to go through and show you a little bit about Android Studio. So what opened up automatically is a mainActivity.java file. This will be where we are writing most of our application for what should happen when someone clicks a button, how to declare that someone has won, and all that stuff. So all of our code for our program will be going in main activity. But for now, we can close it because we are going to do the design portion of it first. When you come to the activity main XML, your screen will look a little bit more like this. So find your activity underscore main.xml. If you can't find it already open, it will be under your RES folder for resources and layout, and it should be right there. I like to get rid of the dual screen. So if you find this blue layered square icon and click on it and then just hit design, you should be only seeing one view. This is where we will be manipulating what our application looks like. So as you can see, you can click and drag the components of your application. Right now, the application is very boring. It only says hello world, but we will be modifying it and adding stuff for our rock, paper, scissors game. What you'll also notice here is that there are two tabs. We are currently on the design tab, which allows us to click and drag visual components onto the screen and manipulate them. And then you'll also see that there's a text tab, which is showing you the XML code for the display, the design that you have made for your application. So if I were to get rid of this button, you'll see that the button tag that described where it was located, what it was, what it had the text on it, all the stuff about that button got deleted too. So if you want, you can work within the activity main XML file and design your application all through XML code, but we are going to be working within the design tab. So the first thing we are going to do is launch our app so that we are forced to create an Android emulator, and so that we can see that it at least launches and works on our computer. This green play button in the top right corner of Android Studio, this play button will launch your application. Right now, our application is very minimal. All you'll see when it launches is this hello world. And what you see pop up is the modal that lets you select a emulator. Right now, I already have an emulator selected and created. You will probably have none. So I'm going to ignore this one that's over here and selected, and we are going to go ahead and create a new virtual device. So something that I do want to show you guys before we go ahead and create this virtual device, I'm going to cancel, is that in our design tab, we are designing on a Pixel phone. So in your design tab, you can choose what phone you want to be designing for. They each have different dimensions and different resolution. So you might notice some changes when you choose one over the other. For example, the Nexus SP is what I assume 5.7 inches versus the 5 inches of a Pixel. The resolution is 1080 by 1920 versus 1440 by 2560. The dots per inch are different. So as you can see, there are just different settings and different screen sizes for these different phones. So just make sure that whatever you're designing on, or designing for rather, is what you will be selecting for your emulator. So go ahead and press that play button again, and we are going to go ahead and create a new virtual device. Now, as I said, the one we are designing for is a Pixel, so go ahead and choose the Pixel out of this list of phones. If you are designing for something other than a Pixel and want to be testing out your app on an emulator that is the same as what you're developing for, go ahead and use a different device. If you want to stick to the Pixel, feel free to do that. We are going to click Next, and next to Nougat over here at the bottom, you should have a download. I've already downloaded it, which is why it doesn't show up, but go ahead and download the Nougat over here. What you'll notice is that the API level is 24 and above, which is above our minimum of 21 that we made a note of when we were creating our project. So if you are interested in what this API level is and what a minimum API level and a targeted API level, what those mean and how that influences what is happening in your application, leave a comment and I will try and get some resources for you to look through. Or better yet, if you want to try your hand at Googling and researching something, that you don't know, this is a good chance to do it. A lot of our work as programmers is a lot of research. So go ahead and download the NuGet system image, and once it's downloaded, you can select it like it is selected here and click Next. When we're here, you can give your emulator or your virtual device, your Android virtual device, a name. I just give it a name that you'll remember to use it. Since I already have a Pixel, it's coming up as Pixel API 24 too. I'm just going to keep it like that. You can manipulate your orientation of your Android virtual device later on, so I wouldn't worry about changing the orientation of it at startup. Then we're going to hit Finish, and it'll create our Android virtual device for us. You will then see it listed in your list of available virtual devices. Choose the one you just created and hit OK. And what should happen, your Android virtual device and your emulator should launch, and you'll see a nifty little Android screen right on your computer. This will operate exactly like an Android device. You can manipulate the volume, you can manipulate the orientation, you can take a photo, all the stuff that you can do on an Android. And once it launches, we will see that it looks like a real phone. All right, so here is our Android device. And for some reason, mine is not launching my application. What should be happening is that the application should launch immediately. Yours hopefully has launched immediately, and you see Hello World on your screen with a project that is named Rock, Paper, Scissors. Mine, unfortunately, is not popping up, so I'm just going to do a little bit of debugging to see if I can find it. That's not what I meant to click on. And I keep clicking on the wrong things, so I am just going to pause the recording and do some research and see why mine is not popping up. So I finally got it working after too long. It had something to do with my emulated device's USB debugging options or settings. So now when I launch my app, my emulator, and it actually pulls up the application. Actually, that's not what was supposed to happen. So let's demonstrate that one more time. There we go. So if your emulator is not showing the application when it launches, leave a comment or shoot us an email and we will try to help you out. It might be a little bit of a complicated issue, but hopefully yours is not causing you any problems. And when you run your application and you choose your Android virtual device, that it loads up your application for you. So now that we have seen that when we launch our app, we get our app visually displayed, now we can start building the GUI for it and making sure it is what we want. So I am going to go ahead and hit X on our emulator and let that close down. And what I'm actually going to do is, I didn't mean to do that, but I want to click on the Hello World wherever it may be and just delete it. So Hello World should be gone. And what we're going to do now is start building up what our application will look like. So I'm going to drag, first of all, a button, and I'm just going to put it somewhere close to the top. I'm going to scroll to the right-hand side of my screen. There is an attributes panel, and this is where you can manipulate any of the details of your view component that you are adding. So the first thing I'm going to do is give my button the ID Rock button. This is in order for us later on to be able to identify which button we are talking about in our code. So we're going to have 3 buttons, and one is going to be Rock, one is going to be Paper, one is going to be Scissors, and we want a way to identify which one is which. So by giving the first button the ID of Rock button, we are saying that this will be our Rock button. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and you'll find a section called Text View, and there will be a field called Text. Let's change that from button to Rock, and if you hit enter, you should see that the text on the button has changed. All right, so that is one button. We are going to click and drag 2 more buttons. We're going to add the second button. It will be Paper button as the ID, and we're going to give it the text Paper. I'm going to just move them over slightly. And then we are also going to give a third button the ID of scissors button, and we are going to give it the text scissors. Awesome. So now we have 3 buttons on our screen. Each has the right ID and the right text on it. You'll notice in the left-hand side there's a component tree which shows you the different components on your app so far. And you'll see that we have some red exclamation points. If you see red exclamation points, this is bad. It means that something is not set up right. And what it's telling us is that this view component is not constrained. We are working within what is called a constraint layout, which means that every component we add needs to be constrained to something in that layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to constrain the left-hand side of rock to the left-hand side of the screen. We're going to constrain paper to rock, and we are going to constrain scissors to paper, and we're also going to constrain scissors on the other end to the right-hand side of the screen. So rock should be pointing from the left to the left-hand side of the screen, paper to rock, scissors to paper, and scissors to the right-hand side of the screen. Then you are also going to constrain the top of rock to the top of the screen, top of paper to the top of the screen. And you can click and drag these back down to be where you want them to be located, and scissors to the top of the screen. So once you have constrained one side and the top, the component knows where it needs to go. It knows it needs to be 40 units away. Oop, I just got rid of that, so I'm going to put that back. It knows it's got to be 40 units away from the left-hand side of the screen. It knows it has to be 60 units down from the top. Paper knows it needs to be 32 away from rock and 60 from the top, and so on and so forth. If you are wanting these to be spaced out perfectly, you can select them all and then use these tools to space out your components. So vertical center might, oh, that does not do what I wanted to do, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to undo. But I do want to explore some of the other ones and see what's available to us. So horizontally, we'll space them all horizontally in a very strange way. Horizontal centers, that's not what I want either. Vertical center, you know what? I'm just going to undo. If you want to explore this, please feel free to. I am not going to do it right now because I clearly don't know what the options are. This might be a little bit better. Distribute horizontally. And again, it's doing it based on something that seems larger than my application. So I'm just going to undo. If you want to explore these options, these are layout options for your components. It seems like they're working on something other than what I'm looking at in front of me, so I'm just going to ignore them for now. So now that I have my buttons, they each have the right ID and the right text. I am now going to go to my palette section, choose another layout. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a layout inside this bigger layout that will house where the images of what the player has chosen their move to be or the computer has chosen their move to be. So we're going to click and drag a component, a constraint layout, and it's going to be nested underneath our buttons. I'm going to constrain the left to the left, the right to the right, bottom to the bottom, and I'm also going to constrain the top to the bottom of paper, so it's always sitting nice and underneath our buttons. So from here, what I'm going to do is simply drag in, if you go to the text panel, I'm going to drag in 2 text views, and they are going to be the labels for where our player move and our computer move will be displayed. So I'm just going to put them directly underneath the paper button, and this is not showing me the ruler, but that's okay. And then when you click on the first one, these don't necessarily need to have IDs because we are not going to be trying to access them from our code, but if you want, you can give them an ID. So this one will be player move text. Let's give it text label as an ID, and the text on it will be players move. And then the second one will be computers move, and its ID can be computer move text label. So these are now no longer centered in the way I want them. And I'm going to try using these once more just to see. So I want the centers to be in line horizontally perfect. So that worked. And I'm just going to drag it to the center. And what I'm going to do is now these constraints are very strange. So I'm just going to actually just get rid of them and center it myself. And I'm going to drag the constraints to either side of my constraint layout and do the same for the computer move. Oop. I'm going to constrain the top to the top of my constraint layout. And you'll notice that the computer label still is giving us a red circle. That's okay, we're going to fix that later on. So we are almost done with our design, and we just have to put an image view for where the images of rock, paper, or scissors will be displayed. So to give you an idea of what will be happening, when I click rock, as the player who's making the move, you'll see an image of a rock pop up underneath the label. Then the computer's move will happen, and you'll see an image of whatever the computer chose underneath that. So we have to prepare that to happen by putting two image views. One is going to be underneath the player move label. So from here, I am going to just have it be a color. I don't want an image in there to start. So I'm going to choose a color just to have a placeholder there. And what you're going to do is add a new resource. And let's add a new color value. And that color value can be anything you want. It's just going to be a little placeholder until we have the choice made of what the move is going to be. So then you can try and resize it to just take some space underneath and manipulate where the other components are. So I want this to be a little higher, and that looks okay to me. So what we're going to do is we are going to constrain this component again to fix its location. I'm going to constrain it to the sides and to the player move up top. Then computer's move is going to be constrained to that one as well. And now you see that the red exclamation point for the computer move label is gone. And we are going to add another image view. Before we do that, if you want to have the same color as the image view you just added, click on the image view you added that you want to take the color from and copy the value under source compat in your image view. So just copy that, click image view, drag it onto your screen, and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to choose a color. We're going to add a new resource and a new color value. Here, take that text that you just copied from the color and paste it in there, and you should end up with the same color. This is the hex code for the color you have chosen. Hit OK. You should be able to resize the second one. Oh. Oop. Uh-oh. So where's my image? Okay, so since I lost it, I'm going to get a handle on it from my left-hand pane. So when I'm here, I can see it. Now that I've selected it on the left-hand pane, I'm just going to click and resize it. If you'd prefer to work not with the handles that I'm working with, you can also manipulate the width and height, I believe, through this. So let's make sure that that can happen. Yep, so if you want to, you can be manipulating the width and the height through the attributes on the right-hand side. I am going to go ahead and keep on playing with it with the click and drag options. So once you have it there and you have it how you like it, let's constrain it again. And we're going to constrain it to the top. And I think it's okay. I think it looks fine. So I'm just going to move things to be a little bit closer to each other in the way that I want them to be displayed. So that's going to be a little closer to that. I made that a little smaller accidentally. So now the image is closer to the label, and I'm going to move this image closer to the label too. Cool. And I'm going to move actually all of these guys up a little bit because I want it to be a little higher up. Awesome. So I am satisfied with how this looks. I have my rock, paper, scissor buttons. I have my player move label, my player move image space. I have my computer move label and my computer move image space. What I forgot to do was give these image spaces IDs. So let's go ahead and do that right now. If you click on the player image move, let's give it the ID of player image with a capital I, and let's give the computer, and then when it tells you it needs to update it, say yes. It's just updating wherever the ID is being referred to. Click on the computer move image space and change the ID to computer image with a capital I. So after that's been done, the reason you have to give it an ID for these ones specifically that is because we are going to be referring to this image space and replacing what's there now with an image of either rock, paper, scissors, depending on what the user or computer has chosen. So once our application design looks okay, let's make sure it looks okay when we launch our app. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to cancel this and do it again. We're going to go ahead and launch our app with that green run button again. You're going to choose your Android virtual device, hit OK, and see your application. So if you've ran this before, you'll see that the old one is up there and something is giving me an error. So let's see what that's, oh, it's because of the color. Okay, so we ran into this in our workshop. What we are going to do, if you're getting the same error with the color, click on the image view and just copy over or cut the text in the source compat and put it in background. So I'm just putting it in background instead for both of these. Instead of the color being in source compat, you're going to cut it and put it in background. Should be the same color, and then you're going to run the application again, and hopefully we will not have an issue this time. Awesome. So here's my application. If I click on the buttons, absolutely nothing happens, and that is perfectly fine because that is what we have so far. So if you have your design all done, you can follow along, and we are going to move ahead to the coding portion of our application. If something is going wrong and either your emulator is not showing your application, or there's an error in launching your emulator, or an error in launching your application, leave us a comment and we will try to help out as best we can. So the next step is to look at our code and how to get our buttons hooked up to something actually functional. The next thing we need to do is start working with our code and hook up our buttons to do the right thing. So when I click on the rock, a rock image should show up in a player's move. If I click on paper, a paper image should show up here. If I click on scissors, the scissors image should show up. After that part's done, then you'll be working on getting the computer's move and the computer image to show. But for now, we are going to get started with actually just getting the images that we want to show up when we click these buttons. We need to download those images. So what we are going to do is go to your favorite browser and type in github.com/integratedetroit. You can just go github.com/integratedetroit to start with, into the URL, and go to this location. When you are here, you'll find a rock, paper, scissors repository. So click on rock, paper, scissors, and what you are going to do is open up the paper, rock, and scissors images. These are images that will be replacing the image space. So when I, as a player, click scissors, for example, the scissors image will be replaced instead of so the scissors will replace this green square over here. So you can open them all in different tabs. You can open them directly through here, whatever you want. If you want to use other images, that's totally fine. Just download them in the same manner that we are going to be doing right now and put them in the same place, so just follow along. You can use whatever images you want. I've just chosen these as examples. So open each image, right-click on it, save image as, and we are going to find our location. So you can put them on your desktop and then paste them in the folder later. What I'm going to do is put them directly into my resources folder over in my application. So if you find your project wherever you saved it, so this is important to remember at the very start of our project when we chose our save location, you want to make sure you remember that. So I am at my rock, paper, scissors project. I click on app, click on source, click on main, RES for resources. And then you're going to go into Drawable, and you're just going to save them in Drawable. So paper can remain paper. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to close the paper tab and do the same for the rock, save image as. And I'm already in the same location that I was before, but just to give you a reminder, find your project directory, app, source, main, RES, Drawable. You're going to save it in there. Same thing for our scissors. Right click, save image as, find that location, and save it. If you saved your images to a desktop or a folder that is not the project folder, that's fine. What you can do is simply you can drag them into the Drawable folder if you want. And if you need any assistance with this step, just let us know. So now if I expand my Drawable folder, you'll see that these 3 images that I saved into my Drawable folder are appearing in my project structure as well. So they are in our file structure. That's awesome. So what I'm going to do now is close activity main XML. We are going to be working within main activity, but I have already created some starter code for you guys to use in helping you get started with this project. So if you go back to your internet browser and take a look at the rock, paper, scissors repository, there is one other file there, which is mainactivity.java. So once you're here, click on raw, and then you can just select all, Command A if you're on a Mac, Control A if you're on a Windows. Copy all the code you just selected. Open Android Studio. Select everything here again and empty out the file, and then paste what you had selected. So some places where you might have errors showing up. Errors are underlined red. So the first place you might have an error is in the package. So if you named your project something other than rock, paper, scissors, your package name is likely going to be different than mine. So what you can do is just change what is written here from rock, paper, scissors to match whatever your project name is. And you should be able to tell what that is because over here, where mine says com.example.rock, paper, scissors, yours should say com.example.something else. So you can change whatever is written on line 1 to match whatever is written over here. Mine is rock, paper, scissors, so I'm just going to keep it at rock, paper, scissors. All right. The other places you might have some red lines are if you named your visual components something, you give the ID of your visual components some other name other than what I had given mine. So if you remember when we were building up our design, I had mentioned that we were going to give these components IDs so we can use them later. If you gave your components IDs other than what I gave them in this video, you will have red underlines here and potentially in these other ones too. So what you can do 2 things. You can either name the components what I named them, and then they'll match up with these, or you can just change these IDs to whatever you named your components. So for example, if you named your rock button rock, instead of rock button, you just named it rock, find the place where I am using rock button and just change it to rock. So after you have fixed those errors, if you have had any and your file is void of any red underlines, we can move on. So I'll explain what is happening here and what is left for you to do, and then I will set you on your way, and you can get in touch with us if you have any problems you've run into or you need any more assistance. So what I have done, and this is where the beginner's level Java comes into play. If any of this, anything that I explain, if it sounds confusing, feel free to reach out to us and we'll send you some resources that you can do some self-learning with. But I do expect that if you are watching this video at this stage, you do have a beginner's understanding of Java. So here you have some global variables. What I have extracted for you guys are the image spaces, the image views, where the computer image and the player image will be displayed. I have also put here the scissor button, rock button, and paper button. In the onCreate method, when your application launches, this method is run, and it sets the view to the activity main XML. It
gets a hold of the computer image space, the player image space, the buttons that I just described up above, and it also sets action listeners, or on-click listeners rather, for each of the buttons. So what this is saying is that when I click the rock button, when I click the paper button, or when I click the scissors button, I am going to go to this method. So whenever I click one of the buttons, I'm going to end up in this on-click method. And the only thing I have put for you guys in the on-click method to start with is the ID of the thing that was clicked. So clicked ID should be equal to r.id.rock button if I had clicked on the rock button. Clicked ID should be equal to r.id.paper button if I had clicked on the paper button, and the same goes for the scissor button if I had clicked on the scissor button. So this is the style that we will use to identify what an ID is. So you can use the clicked ID as well as these particular IDs to figure out what button was clicked, and then based on what button was clicked, you can do certain things. The only thing that I included for you in addition to those two pieces was this method called toast. And what toast does is it just displays a little text on the bottom of the Android screen that says something, and that something is whatever you pass into the toast function. So you pass in a string to the toast function, and it displays a little bit of text on your screen. You can use this method to pass in like a "you won" string, or a "sorry you lost" or "you tied," so that you can use the toast method to display the result. So there might be some stuff that you are still wondering how to do, or maybe you're wondering what the next steps are. So let's go over a little bit of what your next steps could be, and I will show you also how to set an image from the images that you put in your resources folder to one of the image spaces that we made. So the steps that you have to take, and if you don't want to hear these steps, or if you want to challenge yourself and try to complete this project on your own, you can feel free to close the video now. So the remaining part of the video is just going over what are your potential next steps and how do you set an image to an image space. So if you don't want to hear this, that's fine. Just close the video and feel free to comment later on if you've completed it. And we'll say bye to you right now, but if you want to continue and see what the next steps that you could be doing could be, then feel free to stick around. So some things that you could do. What I would suggest doing is, first of all, figuring out what button was clicked. So what button did the player click? You can figure out how to do that by using this clicked ID. As I said before, the clicked ID represents the ID of the button that was clicked. And you can also find the IDs of the individual buttons in this format. So what you can do if you want to find the ID of the scissors button, for example, is do r.id.scissors button. This portion over here should be the ID of the button. So this is component ID. So you can use this to find the ID of any visual component. You just need to put in the ID of the component, whatever you gave it. So use this information in conjunction with this clicked ID to figure out which button did I click. And if you're a new developer, then maybe however you're determining what the clicked ID was or what button was clicked, maybe just do some sysouts and output like text that says I clicked the rock button, or I clicked the paper button, or I clicked the scissors button, in order to test that your logic is correct. The next step after determining what button the player clicked on is put correct image in image space. What this means is that if the player clicked the rock button, that you put the image of the rock in there. If the player clicked the paper button, that the picture of the paper is in there, and so on and so forth. After you have put in the right image, you are going to determine the computer's choice. And how you are going to do this is up to you. What I would do is I would generate a random number between 0, 1, and 2, and then I will describe what I'm saying in words. So generate random number between 0 and 2. So this should be 0, 1, or 2, or if you want, you can do between, you can do between 1 and 3, if that's a little more sensible to you. Whatever you desire, but I would generate a random number, and then based on random number, assign move. So that means, for example, if the random number was 0, maybe 0 always means that the computer is going to play a paper move, or if the number that was chosen randomly is 1, that the 1 always means that the computer is going to play scissors. So based on that random number, assign a move, and then, or put correct image in image space for computer. So I'm going to edit this, and this is for the player. So depending on what button the player clicked, you're going to put the right image. But then based on the random number that you chose, you're going to put the right image for that random number in the computer image space. So, and then what you're going to do is determine the win and display text. So depending on what the player chose, what the random move that the computer chose, you're going to make sure to have the right result of the game. So if the player chose rock and the computer randomly chose rock, then you're going to determine that this was a tie. And then you can display the text by calling toast with the right message. You can display that, sorry, none of you lost or won. It's a tie, whatever you want to say. And then if you want to go further, you can even do, you can play with a reset button if you want. If you do your application, reset game maybe, if you write your code in a particular way, the reset should happen automatically, but I can't anticipate how all of you will be writing your code, so there is a chance that a new game might not work, depending on how you write your code. So this is a general layout of what you could be doing as next steps. That being said, you can do whatever you want. If you want to have a rock, paper, scissors game that doesn't display the right images and displays something wild instead, go for it. You can do whatever you want. This is your application. So if you want to go and do something other than the classic rock, paper, scissors game, that's fine with me. And this video is supposed to get you started, but you can use the tools that you're learning here to build any other app that you are interested in. So the last thing I'm going to show you guys how to do is how to set an image space to something else. So what I'm going to do is I am going to choose one of the 2 image spaces. So let's just say I want to use the player image space. So I'm going to do player move image. This represents the image space for the player. Then I'm going to do set image resource, set image resource. And what set image resource allows us to do is it lets us pass in the ID of one of the 3 images that we put in that drawable folder, and it'll set the image space to that image. So very similar to how you find the ID for a component, you do the same style to find an ID for a drawable resource. So you're going to do r.drawable instead of .id. r.drawable will allow you to look into this folder. So r.drawable and what you can see is that you get in this pop-up the same items that are in that folder, and you can set the drawable to scissors, for example. So what this is going to do, well, let's see what it does. So what should happen is that whenever I click any of the buttons, the button should trigger us going to the onClick method, and what happens in the onClick method is that I set an image of the scissors to the player image. So what you should see is that whatever button I click on will set the player image space to scissors. So let's save, let's run our app, and you can choose that device again. It should pop up, and I'm going to wait a few seconds to let it load the new application. Here's our new application. If I click paper, there's a scissors. If I click rock, it's still scissors. So what you can see that whatever I click, it's just the image of the scissors. So that is how you load something into an image space. you guys can play around with the logic here, but depending on what button was clicked, you should put in the right image. These are the next steps that you can do. So from here, I think that's all you need to know to get started on this basic example of an Android application. Feel free to comment with questions or with other comments if you have them, suggestions, and I look forward to seeing what you guys create. If you finish this project and upload your code in a GitHub repository somewhere, feel free to link us to that. We'd love to see what you come up with. So good luck and have fun.